Good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Lyons, ACT Renew branch convener. And this evening, we've got a presentation by Dr. Gavin Tulloch. And Gavin has been in the renewable energy game a long time. He's an expert in perovskite and dye solar cell technologies, with collaborations over the years with Italy, Greece, China, the UK and Japan. His sectors of expertise include project direction, nanotechnology, corporate marketing, SME development, business planning, entrepreneurship, and development of international collaborations. Gavin's also a co-founder with Sylvia Tulloch of STA, Dysol, and Graetzel Energy. And he's a fellow of the fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. And tonight, Gavin is going to talk about perovskite technologies and solar cells. Thanks very much, Gavin.
Right. Can you hear me?
We can,
Yes.
Gavin.
Thank
Yes.
you. Well, I can get started. Can we have the not the video, the PowerPoint
Presentation,
slide?
just give me
Yes.
1 moment and I will switch that over.
Thanks. In the meantime, I can say that we're not just starting this from DSC and going to PSC. We're not just carrying out a 12-letter span from the D to the P, but we also are going to step back a little bit further and tell a story of from sonar to solar, because somewhere about 50 years ago, Sylvia and I started working together, and our first activity was in the field of underwater sonar, and we set up what is one of the world's best underwater sonar businesses, which is still operating in Sydney. And then some years later than the start of that, we actually got involved in providing solar cells to a project that the Plessy company won called the Raven Man Pack. And I remember that those solar cells were very heavy, very crystalline, and very small cells. Things have changed a lot. Can I go to the second slide, please? So what we're going to talk about this evening is who we are, what have we been doing, where are we going, and just give you an example of the sorts of business-to-business products that we're addressing. Could I have the third slide? Thanks. Now, this is very complicated, but the beginning was a long time ago. And the beginning after the activities with Plessy was actually when we started doing sol gel activities in 1985. Then in 1989, we set up a plant in Queanbeyan to do coatings, sol gel coatings. At that same time, Michael Graetzel invented what was then known as the Graetzel cell and later became the disolar cell. What was it? It was artificial photosynthesis. Meanwhile, we were doing other smart things. We invented the smart window with electrochromics and did some rather exciting energy efficiency studies. There, it's leapt on for me.
Do you need to go back?
No, it's okay. It's okay, because I'll come back to that later. So DSC, or the disolar cell, or the Graetzel cell, was the real beginning of third-gen PV. Second-gen PV had been amorphous silicon, CIGS and CdTe, indium phosphide, of course, all of the thin film vacuum deposited technologies. The first of the next generation was disolar cells. I'm showing you this slide, which is from Disol. And if you look at the picture on the right, you'll see that it is actually a roof. And that roof was part of the, Sylvia, what did we call it?
House of the future.
Yes, thanks, House of the Future. The picture on the left is one of our scientists who I think has recently rejoined us in another company. And that's a flexible disolar cell. Could I have the next slide? Thanks. Yeah, but what's different about a disolar cell from a normal photovoltaic? Well, it's a photoelectrochemical couple. It's not a solid state device. And that was the crunch. That was the big issue that delayed and actually probably finally stopped the commercial realization of disolar cells. This is just a list of the issues in nature that affect a photoelectrochemical couple. Obviously, temperature does, because it affects all competing reactions. Humidity and water, the vapor pressure of the solvents that we used, impurities in any component, effective pH. Are we running at pH 8 or are we running at pH 4? Optical stresses, too much sun and too much UV. And I want to give you an example here. It's called a tree. Trees actually have the brightest colors away from the full sun and away from the UV. And that's all of these issues are issues that also affect the tree. So we had to deal with all of those, and we did it over a period of many years. And let me just go on to a couple more pictures of the things that we did. Could I have the next slide? Thanks. Yes. The House of the Future is the one on the right at the top. The other three were simulations of products that we were developing. The wonderful thing about a disolar cell was that it didn't mind whether it had direct light or indirect light. It didn't mind whether it was 200 lux or 200,000 lux. In fact, it preferred 200 lux. It didn't mind whether it was in the shade or in the sun, and it didn't mind what the shaping was. And we actually did develop for the Department of Defense a product that hung from the trees to capture the sunlight, capture any light, and to actually provide the soldiers with power in the outback. Could we go to the next one, thanks? This is a slide from the 8th of April in 2009 on the roof of our factory then in Queanbeyan, not spelt well, with it facing north. The issue here was that we could demonstrate, and we demonstrate again some years later, that disolar cell actually could produce more energy per day than any other couple if you were using it in the right place. And that right place actually turned out to be North Wales. Could we go to the next slide? And this was North Wales. Now, I didn't change this slide because this was a project called the PV Accelerator, which was similar to a color coat product, which is Colorbond in Australia and Colourcoat. We had a collaboration with what became Tata Steel in the UK. And on the right-hand side, there is a picture that shows 7 or 8 of our staff from the UK holding a long array of disolar cells. Unfortunately, Tata decided that they didn't want to continue with this project at the time that they were suffering from troubles with one of their steel plants in South Wales. Can we go on, please? And I'll come back now to where did we come from and where are we going? So in 2000, I'll start at the beginning. In 1993, we'd established Sustainable Technologies in Queanbeyan and floated on the ASX in 1994 and lost control of the board and privatised it in 2000 and changed its name to Sustainable Technologies International. And that's what it was until Dysol came along. And Dysol came along in 2005, and Sylvia took the reins as managing director while I did international development for the company, such as the UK. In the years that followed, the 2009 was particular because in 2009, Tom Miyasaka developed the PSC or invented the PSC. But what he did was take a disolar cell with a liquid electrolyte and absorb perovskites onto the surface of the titanium dioxide. He was able to get 3.8% efficiency. In 2012, we departed from Dysol and we each did other activities after that. And in 2017, Dysol alone became Graetzel Solar. And in 2018, the company fell on hard times, unable to raise the funds, the 25 odd million that they needed to develop a competitive product to the silicon solar cells that were at that point really leaping in Australia. So following the problems that of the liquidation of in 2018 of Graetzel Solar, we decided that it was time to consider a rescue, and ultimately we established Graetzel Energy and bought a proportion of the equipment from the UK facility and the Australian facility, bought all the IP and the Italian subsidiary, Graetzel Solar Italy. That was what was left of what had been Dysol. In 2020, we set up our first activity with facilities in Wagga. It's actually Bowman, which is a few kilometres out of Wagga Wagga. It's probably remembering the success that we'd had initially in setting up our activities in Queanbeyan to set up once again in a country town. In March this year, we opened a pilot plant for what is called Graetzel Australia in Wagga. And in July, we acquired the module manufacturing plant from Tindo Solar in Adelaide. What's the future going to bring us? Well, GCA, Graetzel, Australia is already expanding into the Wagga base, and we're establishing expanding the pilot facilities to address low light markets and the tandem products of PSC on PSC. I'll talk a little bit more about tandem towards the end. How are we going?
Next slide. Isn't it?
Yes. Now, stepping backwards again, everybody asks, what is a perovskite? So let me give you a little bit of history. Perovskite is AbX3, or the traditional perovskite, calcium titanate, was calcium titanium oxide, where Ca, calcium is the A, titanium is the B, and the oxide is, of course, O3. Calcium titanate was discovered in 1839 by a German gentleman called Gustav Rose. And he named it after Lev Perovsky, a famous Russian mineralogist. Interestingly, somewhat recently, it's been found that the most abundant ore on the Earth is magnesium silicate, which is a perovskite. There are thousands of compositions of perovskites, including uranates, which were developed at Plessey in Villawood in the late 50s. Also in the 1950s, something astounding was developed. It was the ferroelectric barium titanate, and what Plessey called a high K red cap, which was produced by making discs of barium titanate, reducing them in hydrogen, and then reoxidizing. And that gave a dielectric constant of about 12,000. Also, you should be amazed at where you find perovskites. Synrock, the synthetic rock for capturing it was thorium, yeah, thorium radiation from
nuclear reactors.
Yeah. Thanks. That was invented in the early 60s, and at in a very small school of the University of New South Wales called Ceramic Engineering, which Sylvia and I are both alma mater, is it, of. In the 1970s, barium titanate, which had been used as a piezoelectric, was replaced by a combination of lead zirconate titanate, manganese nickel niobate, and they became the piezoelectrics that were used in the Barcelona buoy, and that were the basis of the very large underwater sonar business that we set up. Interestingly, barium titanate with a small amount of doping of yttrium or lanthanum is also a semiconducting and a positive temperature coefficient resistor. And I enjoyed 4 or 5 years of graduate and postgraduate study of that at the end of the 60s. They hadn't gone away, because when the superconductors came along, perovskites reared their head again, and the barium, europium, yttrium cuprate superconductors are just one of the examples of hundreds of warm superconductors. And then returning to where we were in the story of the photovoltaics, MAPI, methyl ammonium lead iodide, was invented by Tom Miyasaka in 2009. As you remember, I said 3.8% efficiency. And what followed was a remarkable increase in performance in a very short time. Two names that are well remembered, Nam Yu Park from Korea and Henry Snaith from EPFL and then Oxford, who both performed, were able to produce 10% devices in 2012. And then Michael Graetzel's team at EPFL broke the 20% barrier in 2015. And of course, since then it's gone to 25%. But that is laboratory. Can I have the next slide, please? What are the advantages of perovskite solar? Remember that disolar cells were liquid. Perovskite solar cells are crystalline solid-state photovoltaics. Disolar cells have excellent efficiency in low light and operate well in all lights, in all light levels. Perovskite solar cells operate very well in nearly all light levels. It is only at the extreme low level of nighttime light that the disolar cell exceeds. We had another story about that, which I'm not allowed to tell. The other issue is that silicon wafers are quite thick. They're 300 microns thick. A perovskite solar cell is as thin as 1 micron, but at least 100 times thinner than a silicon wafer. So it doesn't have the efficiency, the deficiency of having excess weight. It can be flexible and shaped, and you can apply it to any smooth surface. That's similar to some other other thin film materials. But when combined with a flexible plastic substrate such as PEN or PET, it has the lowest weight of any solar cell, and what the Americans call, it has the highest specific power. That is the power generated per unit weight. It can be produced by solvent techniques, by CVD, or even by PVD. And one thing that's very exciting for me for looking at it as a military product is it has a very low infrared signature. Could we have the next one? So what have we been doing? Well, I'm going to show you here some work that's come over the last 3 years from our facilities in both Wagga and in Rome.
3 months.
Did I say 3 months?
No, you said 3 years.
Oh, this one's 2 years old now.
Okay.
Okay, righto. This was a product that we had made by GSI, Graetzel Solar, Italy, our Italian company, and to determine the performance at 1,000 lux. This is for indoor applications or low light outdoor, heavy shade. And the efficiency was found to be 21%. Now, we can get more than that. And if we go to the next slide, we can't go to the next slide. There we are. And if you look down the bottom, you'll see that it's an interesting performance curve. That the PSM is perovskite solar module efficiency, and PSC is perovskite solar cell efficiency. The module efficiency on flexible glass that we're achieving is 23.3%, but at full sun, we lose performance. So this is a product, this particular product is one that's designed for low light applications. We have just started a collaboration with Macquarie University. They do very small laboratory cells, and the PSC efficiency that they're getting at 1,000 lux is 35%. And that's unbelievably good. Could we have the next slide? This is just showing some comparisons of module efficiency in low light of different technologies. And what it has done is to show that outstandingly, the perovskite is the winner by a long way in low light. In fact, it outperforms disolar cells. You'll see the yellow bar. We go to the next one. So where are we going? We were doing lab scale cells some years ago. We started doing module sized devices 2 to 3 years ago. And now we're converting those to product development and ultimately have a plan to produce high volume material in a roll-to-roll facility. And you'll see that our argument for being able to achieve this is for 2023 to 24. Nevertheless, we will have products before then. And if we can look at the next slide. Oh, let me first of all discuss what were the challenges that had to be overcome. See, every technology has a hidden issue with it, but all technologies have the same issue when it comes to comparing lab cells to industrial cells. Research scientists spend their time publishing work on lab cells. Those of us in industry are not particularly interested in being able to get just the 35% in a lab cell. We want to be able to get 25% in an industrial cell, and nearly that good in modules and panels. The perovskite solar cell, the researchers in the universities use a metallic back conductor, which is gold. Obviously, that would increase the cost of the product vastly. So in industry, we address that in 3 ways. The first is with a cheaper metal, such as aluminium or copper. Then composites, combining metal with carbon or graphite or graphene. And ultimately, for the low light products, we use graphene. We have to address the apparent hydrophilicity of the MAPI or methylammonium lead iodide materials. And that is solved in 2 ways. The simplest solution for it is to dope the material with dope the iodide with a fluoride. Another issue that we've had to address is that the product has to last. And many organics, apart from being very expensive, there's an organic hole conductor that's an HTM, which is called spirometad. And it is exceptionally expensive and it gradually decays. So what have we done? We've converted the organics to inorganics. And when our products are on the shelves, there'll be products that are made with fully inorganic materials. And going back to what we learned in working with piezoelectrics, in working with ferroelectrics, in working with perovskites over 40 or 50 years, you will not be able to find out. But in every one of our materials, it will be some smart inorganic doping. Could I have the next? Some of the things that we decided to address, and this is an amazingly large amount of products, and they're all products that have high specific power. That is, as I mentioned, low weight and high power. We've been working with companies in developing concepts for cost-effective drones. The problem with drones that have a long life, that have to fly for 5 or 6 hours, is that the solar cells can cost up to $100,000 for each aircraft. And that's a typical UAV shown on the right-hand side there. So, of course, Internet of Things uses rechargeable batteries and solar. Remote controls, electronics in the house. Digital farming, agriculture, stock control. And if you have a look at the bottom picture there, it's actually an example from one of our collaborations in Norway, where the little bag that's hanging over the cow's neck is actually a stock control device that informs the cow when it's got too close to the fence. Search and rescue, disaster relief, these are activities that, in disaster relief, normally you don't have sun, very good sun. You can have fire, you can have flood, you can have rain, you can have ice, but very rarely do you have good sun conditions. So a product such as the perovskite solar cell is an ideal material for those applications. People always want to put solar on textiles and wearables. Yes, because we have a low infrared signature, that is viable. And ultimately, going back to the work that we were doing with Tata in 2011-12, we'll be addressing the market for very low weight BAPV, building applied photovoltaics, where the marketplace is in the millions of square meters per annum. And it's called sheds, large sheds. Could I have the next one? Thanks. This is one of our concepts that we're working on for a marketplace of at least 10 million per year, and it's a remote control device. Can I have the next one, please? Okay, this is the last one. So having been in solar now since early 1980s, it's been a long time. There've been solutions and there've been non-solutions, but the ultimate solution should be ultra cheap, and it should be ultra cheap solar, and it should be ultra cheap perovskite solar. That is as we say lower down, it's the lowest levelized cost of electricity. And what will they be? The ultimate product will be a tandem, not a tandem of silicon and PSC, but a lightweight tandem or even a triple junction of PSC and PSC. It'll be lightweight, flexible, higher specific power, and most affordable. And with that, I'll seek comments and questions.
Thank you, Gavin. That was a great overview of, well, your work and Sylvia's for the last 40, 50 years. I'm amazed at the flexibility, literally, of the cells and the fact that they can be put on a cheap, flexible substrate. That's a powerful selling point. I was wondering, I was going to type this question, but I'll just ask it now and then hand over to Peter, Peter Robertson. The efficiency drops in very bright sunlight. Is that because the cell is temperature sensitive, so that it somehow affects the efficiency?
In our case, that's a good answer.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are other effects as well.
Yes. Peter,
Yeah,
you look like you're about to ask something.
I was just checking on the incoming questions. We were just waiting for those to come through. Sometimes it does take a little while. But yeah, quite agree with Peter. That was a fantastic presentation. It was great to see what's been happening over the past 10 or so years. It's been quite a while since you've spoken to Renew, or was ATA, back at the last time you did a presentation. But it was wonderful, really, to get that perspective across such a long time frame, and learn a bit more about what's been happening. In the interim, oh, hang on, we do have a question that's just come through the box, so I'll reserve what I had sitting, reserve that for the minute, and get to a question by Jeff Manitsky. And he has asked, what are the expected lifespan of the product, and what are its recyclability characteristics?
Sorry, what was that last part? What was it?
He's after the expected lifespan,
Yeah.
and what you would consider to be the recyclability characteristics.
Well, the recyclability, I'll answer first. That is, if we're using polymers, PET, PEN, you're basically recycling 99% PET. If you are using glass, you are recycling 99.9% glass, because we have something that's just around about 3 microns thick.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, well, what about if there is heavy metal in there? Yes, every heavy metal must be addressed. But when First Solar were pursuing getting approval for cadmium telluride, one of the arguments they used was that there was such a small concentration of cadmium that it was below the threshold level for toxicity. We have lead, but then lead's in everything virtually. You know, we've still got lead acid batteries. So lead is a material that, yes, if it is released as an organic, it can have toxicity. But if it's released as it is in this case, it would be released as lead iodide, which is an insoluble material.
Right.
Now, what was the lifetime, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. Lifespan of the product.
Well, the lifespan for the indoor product will be 10 to 20 years. The lifespan at the moment for the outdoor product would be less than 10 years. But it's a matter of choosing the composition, the formulation that one is using. We aren't pursuing outdoor marketplaces yet. The marketplace for indoor is measured in the billions of square meters or many billions of linear meters of product. So we're not particularly concerned about the outdoor, but those people who are working on it are looking at having to achieve a marketplace, having to achieve a lifetime of 25 years, because if they're going to put it on a tandem silicon device, the silicon has 25 years. So the perovskite solar cell that it's overlaying it also has to have 25 years. Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's good enough economically if it has 10 years. If you just get that bonus, and some people are saying this, that if you just get the bonus for 10 years, that's enough to justify making the tandem. I don't know. I haven't done the sums. So the answer is, what's a lifetime? Anywhere from 10 up. But there's nobody at the moment who could guarantee that they can do 25 years. And we won't be standing up and saying that for another couple of years.
See. So I just got another one come through. Is there an estimate of the energy payback time for Graetzel? This always seems to come up in discussions about other PV technologies.
Yeah, it's less than 3 months.
Wow.
That's very good.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But if you were to use, it depends on how you make it. That's if you use solvent technology. If you use PVD technology, it'll double it. Because it's the amount of energy that you're putting into the vacuum deposition.
In fact, something that occurred to me as you were moving through the talk, you laid quite a bit of emphasis on the fact that the efficiency was, becoming quite good, and especially in low lighting conditions. The thing I guess most attracts me to this subject is the applications for buildings, and particularly on vertical surfaces and windows. Is in a situation like that, but I mean, obviously, as you've spoken about, there's an immense number of potential applications for aeroplanes and whatever. But would the capacity for the overall production, the energy production, would that be competitive with what you would in a low light condition? You would still be producing considerably less than what you're able to get out of a high light condition for a silicon structure cell. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes, if you have silicon sitting out there in an ideal situation of angle 30 degrees, and, right, and a full sun, so put it wherever Cannon Brooks wants to put it, that will give the highest power, and that's why people want tandems, so they can get more power there. But you get nothing out of it if you put it indoors, because you lose all the voltage.
So what potential applications would you be thinking of mostly for the indoor applications?
Consumer electronics is one. Everybody has, consumer electronic material. So
I think it's reasonable to say that we've been approached by a very large manufacturer of household goods who have a current product using silicon cells that is not good enough. And we are working with them to make some samples to substitute perovskite. So it is a market that's being, I mean, they came to us, we didn't come to go to them.
yeah, and just to take Sylvia's point a little further, the silicon they're using is amorphous silicon, and amorphous silicon has an efficiency of 6-odd%. Whereas crystalline silicon. Now, why do they have amorphous silicon? Because it has good performance at low light. Not the best. PSC and DSC are the best, but it has vastly better performance than crystalline silicon at low light conditions. And it's very lightweight, of course, just like we are. But
multiple shapes and so on.
Yeah. So that's our competition, but we're looking at efficiencies of twice what amorphous silicon can produce. And we're not saying that's in the future. That's what we want to be putting out within the next year. And of course, one thing leads to another. And this is a very big research field. There are thousands and thousands of researchers working in this field. And everybody wants to publish their winning solution. So it's unlikely that, oops, what did I do wrong there?
No, you're still going?
It's unlikely that when inventions come forward, that they won't be well spread around the world within a space of days. So we think it's a technology where the resolution of the 25-year problem could just happen. We know what we're doing to approach it. I mentioned one of those is using fluorides, which is a technique for hydrophobicity, and the others we won't mention.
Okay, understood. Another one through here. Are you able to say, is large-scale manufacturing planned for both Australia and Italy or elsewhere?
Australia.
Australia at the moment.
Yeah. Italy is a research base for us because we get very good support from Brussels.
Right.
And it's also we develop LED-based testing equipment.
Right.
And do sales of other equipment. So. But no, it's...
I mean, apart from anything else, the investors are going to be Australian, almost certainly. And I think these days, Australian investors are more and more wanting to see sovereign capability here in Australia.
For sure. Yeah. Becoming a big issue, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Would there be any potential for, just getting back to this issue of the life cycle and recyclability and so on, in a situation where you were looking at a building PV application, say on a window, would it be practical, do you think, to undergo a recoat process at a particular time interval and then just replace the basic
that's
unit with a new coating?
Yeah, our managing director, Tom Fontaine, is very keen on approaching that market.
Mhm.
I think it might be something like a solar film as opposed to actually like a spray coating sort of situation.
Yeah.
So those sort of that kind of conformal layer, which would be probably what would be used on cars as well. So that would be suitable.
Right.
It's not the sort of thing that you could then conveniently spray. I mean, people talk about spray on solar cells, but the actual photovoltaic material could potentially be laid in that way. But you've got to have you've got to have conductors to actually capture the electrons that are being generated on both sides of this solar cell material, and that's pretty hard to just do in a spraying context. So the idea of having a film, like a solar film that you could stick on and then pull off and stick another one on, that's absolutely conceivable.
And you're making them in roll to roll at not very fast, between 2 and 5 meters per minute. And you work out what that is over 8,000 hours a year or whatever. Right? It's a lot of material. It's the world's market.
Yeah.
Right? So make it that way and apply it to the glass.
And how about roof sheeting, for instance?
Yes, well, that takes
been a topic of discussion over the
takes us
past.
back to colour bond and colour code.
Yeah, I mean,
that's.
are we looking at a possibility for applying a film, as you've just been describing, onto a roof sheet, which could then potentially be removed and reapplied?
We were already making solar cell versions of that in 2011.
Yes, I remembered that you'd done some work on it.
Yes, it's very exciting. And one of the great things about having some memory left is that we can remember the successes and the failures, the technical successes and failures of that time that nobody else knows about.
Shouldn't have brought it up.
So we have some little hidden IP.
Now I'm just examining the inbox here again. Okay, this one a similar subject really, but the question is asking: are there also PVs or versions suitable for Windows with a good trade-off between visible light transmittance and energy generation?
Yeah, that's always the the difficult one, isn't it? We had a product once, which 1998, Michael Graetzel and I presented the product at Columbus University in New York. And that product was green, red and white. The top of it was clear glass. The next level was electrochromic. And the bottom level was disolar cell. The disolar cell was the red, the blue was the electrochromic and the clear. Now, we had the technology to do them all. That was the silly thing about it. We didn't have the money or this.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that's the answer. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. But I think the answer is actually be simple. Combine technologies. Don't try to do with one technology what it's not meant to do. Nevertheless, you do have to remember that we were in disolar cells and they were transparent. But I think the sadness is in disolar cells that the last plant is now shut down. There's now nobody left making them anywhere in the world except in very small quantities.
As far as perovskite applications go, that maybe is not something that would have potential in that area, do you think? Or
it can be semi-transparent, yes. I'm just indicating that we're not all that enthusiastic about it as a product.
Yep.
And we haven't done the sums on that. The question was, well, do you get a good balance between light level in air conditioning, etc. So I don't know the answer to it because we haven't treated it as a priority.
Yes, sure. You indicated there's a huge array of different compounds that are potential, have potential applications for making the perovskite structures.
Touche.
At the moment, are there clear winners that you think are coming to the fore?
I'll tell you, a clear loser is the original one that Tom Miyazaki tried. Using just iodine as the X in the ABX3 is a clear loser. That's about all I can say. There's been enough work done to show that you actually need to combine halides and other dopants in your X position and other anion dopants in your X position, and in the A and the B, a mix of lead and tin, or take out the lead and put in the tin, but that has its own weaknesses. But there are solutions to it. We think that going back 50 odd years and remembering some of the material compositions that were developed for other applications might give us a bonus.
Hopefully. Yeah. Just check again on our chat screen. We're coming to the end of our chat questions. I might just quickly go to Peter to see if there were any other issues that had popped up for you, Pete.
Oh, not really. Only the question I just typed out, which it's a comment, really.
Sorry.
That's right.
I missed it.
No, that's fine. I've just turned on my video. There's now, it's a comment, there's now a well-established optical characterization procedure using spectrophotometry to measure optical properties for assessing compliance of materials like this. Again, this is in the PV windows sphere. Measure the optical properties to help predict the performance, solar heat gain coefficient versus visible transmittance, and so on. And I mean, this is really well established now, especially thanks to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and the complex glazing database. This is something for the near future, hopefully, if you want to see these deployed in PV windows in buildings.
Yes, it takes us back, Peter. Do you remember that Sylvia was also managing director of Framex? So
yes,
no comment.
Sure. Yeah, that's right, Sylvia.
We've done a lot.
Yep.
Right. Big career. Or careers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think.
Oh, Peter, there was one other, just a comment, a quip. It wouldn't have gone unnoticed that this has to be one of the greatest techie puns of all time, Graetzel.
Yes, so it was invented by the late Hans de Silvestro, who was a great scientist who fell off a cliff in Switzerland. He was a good, very great scientist, a good man. And in 1997, 98, we were sitting together outside. Now, what's the hotel in Lausanne?
I don't remember.
Oh, Mervynpick, the Mervynpick in Lausanne, and chatting about how we could collaborate together, because he was running Leclanche's, he was the technical director of Leclanche, a battery company that had a disolar cell activity, and you know what I was doing. So we decided that we were going to set up a joint venture, by the way, which nearly came off. Unfortunately, nearly is not good enough. In any case, that's another story. And when we were doing it, we had to choose a name for it. Leclanche had 50%, we had 50%, and Hans decided that it should be Graetzel because it's the same as Graetzel, and it would give Michael Graetzel the ego trip that he wanted.
Right.
I should mention that Michael Graetzel then did actually become a shareholder in that company when I bought it.
Good.
That was in 2003.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, over to you if you
Well, I mean, I think it's been wonderful, really, to hear about what you've got in mind, and it's fantastic to see you both back on the scene with such force.
Yeah.
And
we have the guy who runs Wagga for us, worked for us 20 years ago as a cadet.
Excellent.
Now he's 40 years old. And
yeah. I mean, there just seem to be a fantastic array of potential applications that could come up in the very near future. I mean, things like transport applications would be,
yes.
You've already mentioned the appliance applications, which would be fantastic. And you can see
we have
fantastic opportunities there, but transport would be wonderful.
So I have an EV, and Gavin gets range anxiety. And I mean, I have this feeling that if we had a photovoltaic skin on it and we could just park it for a couple of hours, let it charge up and get us to where we needed to go, people's range anxiety will go away.
It could be just a throw over. But we do have a collaboration with a company in Toronto, in Canada, who are doing trucks. American trucks,
what we call a ute, really.
Yeah, ute backs. We are also part of the team with Gilmore Space for the very large space project.
Right.
So, look, we can put these things in space, but we can't put them in space if you use the MAPI. The traditional, because it has titanium dioxide in it, which has likes short wavelengths and UV as a good way of destroying things.
Yeah, it'd be very high UV environment.
Yeah, so if we move away, and this is simple material science, if you move away from that, you've solved the problem. We have other markets which want UV. But ultimately, if I can just sort of finalize by saying, yes, our long-term dream is to take over from silicon. Not Sylvia and myself, but for the technology to take over. And because there's a beautiful solution, which is the Perovskite solar cell tandem. It's just simple, and you don't have to have weighty, large 8-inch by 8-inch silicon cells to deposit your PSC on. We're just roll to roll. And the way we were planning to do it with and the way we demonstrated it, Tata, was actually laminating 2 rolls. So you can laminate 2, you can laminate 3, you can laminate 4. It's just extending your line.
Yeah.
The colour coat line at Tata, or Chorus as it was originally, was several hundred meters long. So that's all it is. It's just a matter, remember, this exactly the same amount comes out no matter how long your program, no matter how long your machinery. Your machinery could be 1 kilometre long, and it's a matter that you've got 1 kilometre of material that's waiting, but every metre that comes out, there's another metre.
Yeah.
So,
Are there any, just one last thing that's sprung to mind on that point, are there any limitations to panel size in terms of the operation of a perovskite cell? Like if you had
there were with
large
disolar cells, yes, because of the liquid electrolyte, which we had to trap. We did find a solution, but by then it was all over. But no, I think the argument is to maintain the thickness of, if you want to put something down that's 50 nanometers thick, and it's got to be plus or minus 10%, and in fact, in batteries, it's plus or minus 2%. So if I've got something that's 100 nanometers thick, and I've got to make that plus or minus 5 nanometers, say, to get reproducibility, to get no noise. So that's easier the narrower you are.
Right.
Okay.
What about the other dimension, just in terms of the sort of...
The length can be anything, but then it's just a matter of programming where you're putting your tabs on. So I envisage it having, somebody wants 100,000 linear meters of product, right? And it might be 10 centimeters long each one, right? So you got a tab every 10 centimeters. Right? So it's just a matter of programming. Now I'm not going to do the programming. I'm not good at that. I'm good at dreaming up the solution.
Yeah. But in principle, it's not really a restriction then on the operation of the cells.
Yeah, the width you're going to have to combine widths. If you want something that's 10 meters by 10 meters, it's going to have to be sewn together, or laminated together. Yeah.
A lot of ribbons.
In my limited vision, it has to be.
Yeah. Well, I think at this point we might say very sincere thanks for coming along and telling the story. It's a wonderful story to hear.
Yes.
We should make sure that we stay in touch and see what's happening on a future occasion. Hopefully not as far off as this one was to the last one we did, which is going back a long time.
Maybe next time we have an event in Wagga, you'll come down and have a look there.
Well, yeah, that's always a possibility.
Sure, you're on the invitation list.
Thank you.
That'd be great. Thanks very much from
And we do shout at dinner afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
We'll definitely be there.
Yeah, that's it then. We're one. Just before I go, for other listeners that we've got at the moment, I should just remind everybody that the next session is unusually only a short time away. It's another 2 weeks. And we've got Triple E and some of his work colleagues, who are going to tell us about what they've been doing with the weather files, future weather files, and the data that they're actually going to be presenting at a conference in early December. So that one is going to be well worth keeping your eye out for. It'll be advertised on the website and coming through in the email newsletter in another week or so. So yeah, to look forward to that one before the end of the year. Thanks again, and we'll sign off.
Till soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you,
Bye-bye.
Alex. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alex.